Hey everybody, we're super excited to have you here for our last Zoom interview series. We've been doing these Zoom interview series over the last several weeks, every Thursday, and we've been able to talk to so many different industry professionals, and we're excited about the guests that we have here today. But before we get started, I do want to let everyone know that you are muted for safety reasons, but if you have a question, please use the chat feature to ask your question. If you're on your cell phone, you will have to click on the more button in order to access the chat feature. But we do want you to get your questions in so that our guest can answer them after the interview. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Tim, it is so nice to have you here today. And we just cannot wait to hear from you. So if you will just take a few minutes and introduce yourself.
My name is Tim P. My professional name is Tim P. I am 63 years old. I've been in the music business since I was 14 or 15 years old. And hey, Cam.
Good to see you.
You too. I've been in the music business since I was 14 or 15 years old. Like probably a lot of people in junior high, high school, I was somewhat musically inclined, and I decided that it would be a great way to meet girls. And I was right on both counts, actually. But as my career went along and I graduated high school, I was in a band, I realized that my true calling was as a writer of music. And for the first probably 10 years of my career, 12 years of my career, I was a musician in a band. I was the writer. I had a record deal. We were called Flies on Fire on Atco Records. And later on, I was in a band called Vitamate on Bongload Custom Records, which is the same label as Beck. And that was kind of a short-lived thing. And then around the time I turned about 35 or 36 years old, I had done my record thing. I had lost my record deals. And at the time I was working as a pizza delivery person at 35 with a family. And I decided I better make something happen. So I started a music. I got involved through a friend of mine in composing. And I started out as his kind of helper. I had to learn all the equipment. I'll show you the equipment that I use here in a minute. And we did my first gig was doing music for the food courts at Universal Studios at the Hulk ride. So that was my first big gig. And but I learned a lot, and what I learned was that I could do this, be a composer, and that I could make money at it. And it was kind of like a real switch between being an artist, because I was an artist before. I was, my music was what was in my heart, to becoming a commercial artist, which was, a little, made my wallet a little fatter, let's put it that way. So, and for the past 20 or so years, I've had a company called Boss House Music, which I actually sold last year, or earlier this year, I should say. I've had this company, and I've done a lot of composing for different for different shows. I did Reno 911. Some of you folks out there might be young enough to remember Good Luck Charlie. I did all the episodes of Good Luck Charlie. I did Larry the Cable Guy movie. I've done a whole lot of stuff like this. And I started a music company where I would write music and then license it to different entities, especially Fox Sports. So like at a football, if you're watching football or NASCAR or something like that, when they go to the commercial, quite often it's the music that I've written that takes you to that wonderful commercial. And the good part about that is I get paid every time that happens. So I can think of worse things. So anyways, and that kind of brings me to now. I've kind of broadened my horizons. I haven't given up music at all by any way, shape, or form, but I've become a bit more interested in more personal things. I have a YouTube channel now. I love hiking. I love talking about music and classic bands. And that's kind of it's called Hiking for Life. And that's kind of what I've been doing for the past year or so. And, just kind of hanging out with my family more so than ever for the past 3 months. So.
Well, that's so awesome to kind of hear your story and see how you ended up where you are. My first question for you is, when you were working with your company and you were writing music for these different shows, what did your everyday activities look like? What did the what did it look like to be Tim during that time?
Well, when I had my company, Boss House, and was composing, there's a lot of hours that go in. No one is successful without putting in more than 40 hours a week at wherever you do. I was putting in 70, 80-hour weeks because I'd start out here at my, I'll show you, here's kind of my setup right here. I don't know if you can see that. That's my computer with my music program. And those are some of my, I'm a guitar player, although I do my best to play the piano too, to varying degrees of success. But anyways, what I would do is I would sit here and start out with something. If I had an specific assignment, I'd work on that, getting sounds, actually, figuring out how to, what I was going to write, what they wanted. And when I was doing music to picture, it's kind of a different deal than doing it not to picture. When you're composing, you're looking at what's going past you and putting the music in there, and then it has to be okayed by those folks. And I would generally work from about 7 a.m. to noon or whatever. I'd take a break, do a little business. I'd work again because my studio's in my house. I'd do a little business. I had a partner with Boss House, and which was very fortuitous. And the problem with having a studio in your house is sometimes you find, well, I have nothing to do. It's 8 o'clock at night. You turn it on, all of a sudden it's 1 a.m. and you're still working on it. But that was generally speaking my day. I tried to take weekends off when I could. You got to balance your career with your family. It's hard to do. And I think it's probably the hardest thing to do. But anybody that gets into this kind of thing, any kind of music that really makes a living at it, you have to be pretty ambitious, I think, to do it. So.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned that you wrote for several different shows, one in particular, Good Luck Charlie.
Yeah.
I have a daughter that's a teenager, and that was one of her favorite shows growing up. So,
well, funny thing about that is many times, again, I'll show you, this is my room right here. My TV's in it too, though. But it's, I had the cast up here many times. If you ever listen to the shows, and these were the fun shows to do, where it was when the actors would sing, I would have them here singing, and not all actors are good singers, so you'd have to really hold their hands through it. Bridget Mendler was a great singer, but some of the other cast members weren't, and you'd really have to be part musician and part like kind of mom to them, because a lot of people, when they're singing for the first time and people are listening and stuff, it can be very frightening. I've been doing it for years and it frightens me. So
my question for you is, during that process, was it all of your creative vision, or did they have ideas coming into it of what they wanted that sound to be like or the song to be like? How does that creative process work for you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because my creative ideas would always be different than what they actually ended up with, because, as a musician, I'm a bit more avant-garde, if you will, than I think what they were looking for. Usually what would happen, once you'd get the job, you'd have to demo for a job. You'd have to submit something and they'd have to interview and go, okay, this is the guy I want. And generally speaking, it would take, a week or so to kind of get into the groove of what they wanted, and my job as a composer is not to give them what I think is the best thing. It's to give them what they think works on their show, and we'd butt heads sometimes about it, but after a while they get to trust you, and it gets easier as it goes along. So
yeah. So what would you say has been the best part about being a composer, and tell us why?
The best part about being a composer, well, really it's doing something that I really dug doing. It's like, I love music. It's just part of me. And, at that point in my life where I was actually making a living at it was, it was pretty, it was kind of a mind blower to me because I worked so hard to do it up until then. And I have to tell you, I really didn't become financially successful doing this till I was 45 years old. So, you know, it took me a good long time in my career. I feel that I was one of those rare people that I really appreciated what I had. You know, I knew I had something good. And yeah.
So what would you say has been the best, or well, let's back up. So what would you say has been the biggest professional accomplishment of your career, and how did you make it happen?
Well, I don't know. I think everything kind of, you know, coalesced into one big thing. I mean, there's shows and things that I've done that I'm prouder than others. I got a show that I did 7 seasons of called Reno Now A Long, which was on Comedy Central. And it was a little bitty show at first. No one cared about it. It was probably the easiest gig I ever got because no one really wanted to do it. And that was really a wonderful experience on all levels. And it was usually in a show you're working with a producer who's not on camera. And that show, the producers were the actors. It was Dangle. It was, you know, all the primary actors were producing the show. And they were hilarious too. It was a really funny show to work on. You know, when you're working on a show, you're looking at your screen 100 times at the show. And if it's a bad show, you get bored awfully quick. But if it's funny, you know, it's great. So.
Yeah. So one of my favorite questions to ask people, especially for students to be able to hear the answer, is what are some careers that you have discovered as an adult that you had no clue even existed when you were in high school? So one of the things that we like to do is to expose students to different careers that they've probably never even heard of. So could you give us some examples of what you've discovered?
Well, I've never known people got paid to dog walk before. And that's, you know, I certainly would be, I love dogs. So, but careers, well, I think that what is really different now than was then, and what is really exciting, because I've been dealing with a lot lately, is YouTube. I mean, there's a platform out there where you can make a movie and have people watch it. And I think what's really important in this, in any field, entertainment field, is you have to gain experience, man. You think you know what you're doing. I started making YouTube videos a couple of years ago, and at my age, and I look at the first ones I made, and I'm like, oh my God, they're terrible. But you learn, you know, and that's what it's all about. But anyways, I think that's a really powerful thing that people can use. I mean, you know, I'll show you again my setup right here. You know, it's like, oops, I got a song up right here. I mean, you have a recording studio now on top of your desk. You know, I don't know if you can see all this. This is my outboard gear. It's really not a whole lot, but you know, recording studios used to cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars an hour. And basically, man, you can get yourself set up pretty good for, you know, $1,500. And so I think that the technology is really amazing. And I think most young people are a lot more tech savvy and a lot more network savvy, because that's really what it's about. The record companies and stuff really don't exist very much anymore. It's really about networking and selling your own stuff. So
yeah, so if we had some students that were on here today that are interested in maybe getting into music, a career in music, they're not really sure what they want to do, but they want to try it out. Do you have any advice for them of maybe how to get started, very basic?
Well, I mean, you know, there's a lot of different facets. If you want to be I mean, one of the regrets I have about, because I didn't know I'd end up being a composer. So one of my regrets was that I didn't learn how to play the piano and didn't learn how to read music. I still don't really read music, and didn't become more proficient at a musical instrument, you know. And I think that, you know, depending on where you want to go, you know, if you're into the business part, there's internships, as I'm sure probably every other person that's been on here has talked about. And I think that, you know, if you're like me and wanted to somehow market some of your music for, there's people license music. And what that means is that they pay you for the right to put that music either in their TV show or whatever. And you get paid 2 different ways that way. You get a license fee from them, which could be anywhere from gratis free to thousands of dollars. And then you join a society like BMI or ASCAP. I'm sure most of you have heard of that. And when that piece of music is played on whatever you've licensed it to, you get paid. So you get paid for the life of the way that plays. And one of the ways to do that is to put some music together and start calling music supervisors. There's I mean, I haven't had to do that in a long time, but there's things online right there where you can get a hold of some of these people. Now, there's a lot of people knocking on their doors. So you got to, whatever you got to, you show them has to be good. And when you do submit music to somebody, I think the mistake most young people do is they'll submit 20 things or 10 things. Submit 1 or 2 really good things and take it from there. They don't care if you know how prolific you are. They want quality. It's not so much quantity.
Yeah. That's great advice. And, you know, that's something that I haven't really thought about in the music industry, that there are lots of doors being knocked on, but you've got to figure out how to stand out and be different, and quality over quantity. I love that. So my last question that I have for you, and then we're going to open it up to students to ask questions, is what is something that you wish you would have learned at a younger age?
You know, and I've touched on this already, you know, I think anybody in the creative music business, are pretty driven people, I think, for the most part. And sometimes you forget about the other things in your life. You know, my family has had to suffer through some, not so much lean times, but they've had to suffer through me working a lot and being gone and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that wasn't easy for them. And I wish that maybe at an earlier age, I was more aware of, you know, of that, and not just so much career, you know. So that's really probably my only regret, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, that's so hard for people that love to work and love what they do. And just like you mentioned, having a studio at your home, you know, when you love your work, it's hard to get away from your work sometimes.
It is. It's like playing a video game. I mean, my grandson's downstairs right now playing Fortnite, and I can tell he's like super into it. And it's hard for me to go, hey, get off that thing, because it's no different than me being on this thing. You know, you get caught up in it. Time flies by. It just vanishes. That's the best part, though, too, when you're in that moment and you're creating something and time ceases to exist. That's when it's really, really great.
Yes. So we do have a couple of questions coming in from our students. Cool. So the first question that we have, it says, will you get paid forever from royalties from the music that you created?
Yes.
So forever.
Well, you know, as long as it's on. It's like, you know, I mentioned Reno 911, which, you know, was on Comedy Central, which, you know, there's various degrees of payment from BMI. Comedy Central doesn't pay a whole lot. You get a couple cents when it plays. But when it's syndicated and all of a sudden was playing on 200 different stations around the country, times whatever you got by 200. Now, it doesn't play much anymore. I don't make much on that. So you got to kind of keep current and fresh and all that kind of stuff. I do have things, though, in my pipeline that, you know, they'll last forever. And, you know, since musicians don't get a pension, it's kind of my pension. So
that's very interesting, because that's a whole world that many of us have never even seen or, you know, been involved with.
It's called intellectual properties, and let me tell you, folks, if you want to get into a great business model, this be it, because you get paid forever, you know, for doing something once. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I like that.
Okay, so the next question that we have is, how do you make connections in the industry when you get started? How did you make your connections?
Well, again, I'm not the networker that some people were, and I got together with a partner who was Stephen Phillips, and who still is part of Boss House Music, and he was just he knew how to do it, you know. But that being said, our secret weapon was taking people to lunch, you know. There's a lot of people in the music industry, you know, that aren't the high ups. They don't get asked out to lunch a whole lot, you know. And so, you know, we'd take them to lunch, talk them up, kind of play some stuff. And, you know, you're really selling yourself. I think, you know, a lot of my day jobs when I was younger was being a salesperson. And I think that's really important. You know, if they like you, they're more open to liking your music and using your music. So, and I also think that on some level too, you have to, it is sales, and you have to learn how to close your sale, you know? So yeah.
I love that you said that. That's something that's come up with several of our guests that we've had is, you know, if they like you, they're going to like doing business with you. And so
Yeah.
many times
And treat them right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so many times I think that students are like, well, if they don't like me, who cares? You know, they have this sort of mentality, but it is important to be likable.
That was my band mentality way back in the day. I loved it if you hated me.
Okay, so the next question that we have is, let me see, let me scroll on down. Okay, I like to write music, but have no idea how to get people to hear it. How do you get your music out there? And I know there's different options. We've talked about YouTube, but is there any other ways to get your music out there if you're just
well, I mean, you know, really playing live is where it's at when that is, and that is you know. Right now, I know you can't do it. So maybe a good thing to be doing right now is woodshedding your songs, you know, getting that part of your career together. But let's face it, man, the best way to get out there and get people to hear your music is face to face. And then everything builds on top of that, you know. And if you're writing something great and a lot of people are coming out to see, and all of a sudden you do you know, you do something that gets on YouTube. It's that movie, The Wonder, or that thing you do, is very weirdly kind of the way, you know, maybe not that quickly, but the way that kind of stuff happens. So, yeah, I really think playing live is still the way to get out there and do it. But, you know, if you've got a great song, people will listen to it. And I think the other way is if you could possibly get it in a TV show or something, there's a lot of promo to be made out of that, man, you know?
So next question that I have is, you mentioned that you've done music for sports shows, but also TV shows. How is the music different?
Well, for sports shows, it's much more what I want to do, because for sports shows, what they're doing is they're renting your library. You're not writing the picture on a sports show. They're taking a piece of your music, and through editing, they're cutting that piece of music in over whatever it is. I do a lot of my music appears in NASCAR right now. And so I wrote that music with a metal edge to it, specifically so it has a lot of energy. Now, getting in with those guys at Fox Sports took years. That was really hard to do. But I have to say, as far as, because they use so much music at a place like that, that has been the most lucrative avenue that I've had. And, you know, the other thing you find out in this business, you're hot for a while and then you're not hot for a while. But you know, I really don't have a company that hires writers anymore. A lot of companies do. Jingle Punks is one of them. They're probably the biggest music company that there is out there. But if you go online and look at music libraries, 5 Alarm's another one, Killer Tracks. As a matter of fact, I started out by writing for Killer Tracks. I wrote like 20 songs from way back when, and some of them still appear on this kind of stuff. So, but I really like doing sports music because it was totally what I wanted, totally what I felt like doing that day. And, you know, I could make it metal. I can make the guitar the lead instrument. I can make organ the lead. Whatever I wanted to do, I could do. It wasn't up to me what they use, but, you know, it was up to me what I gave them. So.
Next question that we have is, you mentioned that you don't know how to play the piano, and you're not necessarily proficient.
I do know how to play the piano. I just badly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you create the music when you're composing? How does that work?
Well, it depends on what it is, you know. And I do use the keyboard a lot composing, because you're using samples. I mean, I can compose in an orchestral arena. It just takes a really, really long time, you know. And playing guitars for years, chords are chords, you know. They're chords on the piano, whatever. And I understand piano stuff, like, you know, I don't have it set up right now, but, you know, if you look at any composer, the thing that they have right here is they have a board, you know, and a keyboard, because there's no way around it. I just wish I did it better and understood it better. But when you're composing something, you usually look at the picture and you go, what is the director trying to say right here? What are they trying to say right here with what they want the music to? Or they may give you notes. saying we want it bombastic or we want to pump up the energy, whatever it is. And you just go by that. You complete what you have to do. You send it to the producer or director. They cut it in under their picture. They hear it and they give you notes. They'll tell you yay or nay. It's about 0% of the time that you get by with what you gave them. But usually the changes aren't that big. You're usually pretty much on the same level with them. And, I think another way to get into composing is find a student that's doing a film on YouTube or whatever and offer to score their film. You're not going to make any money out of it, but the experience is really great. And offer to score the film for a credit, so.
I love that. That's such good, tangible advice for these students to reach out to maybe other students who are interested in the film industry.
Absolutely.
Work
all
together.
about networking.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next question that we have is, does your location matter? If you want to be a composer, where you live, does that matter?
It used to. It used to matter very much, and that's why I ended up. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and it's why I ended up here in Los Angeles and stayed there. But it doesn't anymore. In the old days, when I was scoring shows, like I said, there's a lot of changes. They'd have couriers come to my house 5 times a day, giving me the new, the new CD-ROM of the thing. I give them music to take to cut into the show. Now you do it over the computer. It's instantaneous. It doesn't matter where you're at. You can do it from a laptop in your, anywhere. You as long as you have a connection, a internet connection, you can do it. So I don't think it's that necessary. Does it help out a little bit? Yeah, because it's hard to take people to lunch from 3,000 miles away. But,
So just to make sure that the students understand, can you explain exactly what it means to score a show?
Scoring a show means the music that you hear underneath it, from the, like on a half-hour sitcom, for instance, which is the most basic thing and probably the easiest thing to score. You just have to, there's a wide range of things. It starts out with the opening. It's called a cold open. They usually show you kind of what the episode's about. Then it moves to the theme. The theme you only write once. It plays again and again. Then there's what are called interstitials or bumps. When you hear the music that takes you into a scene or takes you out of a scene, you write those. And quite often they use the same ones. And then, like in a show like I did Good Luck Charlie, there were a lot of musical numbers that you'd have to score, for the show itself. And then you go about doing those. So that is the music. In a movie, there's more music. And generally speaking, people think a score is some big theme. It's like your music. And what they generally want is underscore. They want stuff where you're really not noticing the music, but it's in there, And if you watch most shows, that's what you hear. The good news about that is that BMI and ASCAP pay the same for that as they do for the big theme. So,
okay, we have time for one more question. The last question that we have is: you've mentioned movies, TV shows, and sports. Are there other things that you can write music for entertainment purposes?
Well, if you're asking me what my, hey man, you can write music for somebody's bar mitzvah and charge them for it, for me, it's those have really been the things. Obviously you can sell records to and write music for yourself. Like I said, there's that distinction between being a artist and a commercial artist. And, I think those are the main things. But, people pay for music for, videographers that are doing weddings. They have to pay for that music. And, there's other ways to make. If you're on YouTube, you can get music for free. Well, why not start a library where you give the music for free, but YouTube pays you for the music? That was something I was kind of thinking about. Maybe you could do. These are, little ideas I have that I no longer have the energy to do. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, it has been so nice to chat with you today. I could not hear the very first part of your introduction, so I want to make sure, if you've already done this, if you don't mind to do it again, can you please tell us how to pronounce your last name?
Well, my name is Tim P. is my professional name, P period. It's because my last name is 13 letters long. I have a very Polish last name. It's Paduskiewicz. And which is really weird because I'm like 1/8 Polish, but that is the name that I have. And yeah, it's a great conversation starter though. So
Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to add? Any advice or anything like that you'd like to leave with our students before
Well,
we
I
end?
mean, I just think that as with anything, you've got to do what you love. You don't always know what you love in high school yet. You know, sometimes it takes some time. But if you have a passion for something and you're good at it, and you're obsessed with it in a good way, I think that's what the path you kind of have to follow, and you were born to follow. So.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Tim. I look forward to chatting with you again in the future. It was so nice to meet you. Have a great
Awesome.
afternoon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.